I sold the house on a Tuesday, closed the deal at 10 in the morning, signed the last page, handed the keys to a real estate agent named Beverly who smelled like lavender and kept saying, "Congratulations," like I'd won something. Maybe I had. By Thursday, I was on a plane to Portugal. I didn't tell my son. I didn't tell my daughter-in-law. I left one thing behind, a small envelope, sealed, sitting on the kitchen counter of the house that was no longer mine. What was inside that envelope is the reason my son hasn't spoken to his wife the same way since. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to Christmas Eve, because that's where this really started. That's the night my son looked me in the eye across the dinner table I'd owned for 31 years and said, "Dad, you're rattling around in a 5-bedroom house alone. That's not living. That's just hoarding space. I'm 63 years old. I buried my wife Lorraine 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to gone. I still reach for her side of the bed sometimes when I wake up at 3 in the morning and the house is too quiet. My son knows this. He was at the funeral. He held me up when my knees went at the graveside. But apparently grief has a shelf life, and apparently I'd exceeded mine. My son's name is Aaron. He's 38. He works in commercial real estate. Or he did, until the investment he made with his wife's brother went sideways. I won't pretend I understood all the details. Something about a mixed-use development outside Phoenix that was supposed to be the next big thing. The construction loans came due. The tenants they were counting on didn't materialize. The brother-in-law, a man named Vic, who I'd never trusted since the first handshake, disappeared into a consulting job in Denver and left Aaron holding the paperwork. Aaron's wife is Melissa. She's smart, organized, and has wanted things her whole life with a focused intensity that I used to admire. Now I recognize it for what it is. She wanted Aaron's income. She wanted the house in Scottsdale. She wanted the private school for their daughter Lily. And eventually, she wanted my house too. They started coming over more frequently around October. I should have noticed the pattern. Sunday dinners that used to happen once a month became weekly. Aaron would help me with things around the yard, things I hadn't asked for help with. Melissa would make comments, casual ones, about how much upkeep a house this size must require. "All these rooms, Walter. Who needs all these rooms? My name is Walter. I've lived in that house since 1989. Lorraine and I chose it together from a handwritten listing on a bulletin board at a credit union. We painted every room ourselves over 2 weekends in August. We brought both kids home to that house. We buried our dog Chester in the backyard under the oak tree. That's what a house is. It's not square footage. It's not an asset. It's the physical record of your life. But try explaining that to Melissa. Christmas Eve dinner. Aaron made the prime rib. Melissa brought a pecan pie that Lily had helped with. The crust was a little uneven, and I told Lily it was the best pie I'd ever had, and I meant it. For about 40 minutes, it felt like a real family gathering. Lily sat next to me and asked me about the model train set I'd promised to show her after dinner. She's 9. She still thinks her grandfather is someone worth knowing. Then Lily went to watch a movie in the living room, and Aaron poured us both a second bourbon, and Melissa folded her hands on the table, and I understood that the dinner had been a setup. "We need to talk to you about something," Aaron said. I set my glass down. "The Phoenix project is in default," he said. "We're about $400,000 short of where we need to be to avoid foreclosure on our house." I said I was sorry to hear that. I meant it. "We've been trying to figure out a way through this for 6 months, Melissa said. "We've looked at every option." "Every option except the obvious one," Aaron said. He looked at me the way a man looks at you when he's about to ask for something he knows he shouldn't. "Dad, this house, what is it worth now? You must have had it appraised." "I've never had it appraised." "Ballpark," he said. "In this market, a 5-bedroom in this neighborhood, we're talking over $1 million, right?" I didn't answer. Melissa leaned forward. "Walter, you're 63 years old. You're living here alone. This whole house, all by yourself. Don't you think, at some point, it makes more sense to downsize? Live somewhere with less maintenance? Somewhere more appropriate? Appropriate, I repeated. For your age, she said, for your situation. I asked what my situation was. She didn't hesitate. You're alone in a house that's too big for you, that could be providing real financial relief for your family right now. And you're, I don't know, Walter? You're just sitting in it. Aaron put his hand on the table, not quite touching mine. We're not asking you to give us anything, Dad. We're asking you to consider liquidating an asset you don't really need anymore so you could help us, and still have plenty left for yourself. Plenty, I said. You'd still have over $1 million after everything. You could buy a condo. Something easy, something manageable. I looked at my son for a long time. I thought about the room upstairs where he used to build model planes on Saturday mornings. I thought about Lorraine's garden in the back, the rose bushes she planted this spring before she got sick, the ones I'd been tending for 4 years because I couldn't bear to let them die. I thought about Chester under the oak tree. I said, I'll think about it. That was the first mistake, because to Melissa, I'll think about it sounded like, yes. January was a campaign. That's the only word for it. Phone calls from Aaron every few days, always starting with how I was doing, always ending with some variation of the same conversation. Melissa texted me articles about right-sizing and senior-friendly communities, and once, memorably, a listing for a one-bedroom condominium in a development called Sunset Pines that had a shuttle to the grocery store twice a week. I'm 63. I drive myself to the grocery store twice a week. I'm 63. I drive myself to the grocery store. My neighbor Frank, we've been friends for 20 years. We watch football together every Sunday from September through February. Frank noticed something was off. You seem like a man being eaten from the inside, he said one Sunday in January during halftime. I told him what was happening. All of it. He listened without interrupting, which is one of Frank's great qualities. When I finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" I said I didn't know. "Yes, you do," he said. "You just don't know if you're allowed to want it." Frank is 67 and has been divorced twice and has figured out some things about life that took him a while to learn. He's not a wise man in the movie sense. He doesn't say things that sound like fortune cookies. He just occasionally says something so plain and true that it lands like a stone in still water. I drove home that Sunday and I stood in my living room and I looked at the photographs on the mantel. Lorraine at 32 on a beach in Maine, Aaron at 4 on a bicycle with training wheels, my daughter Carla at her college graduation, Lily at the hospital the day she was born, me holding her like she was made of glass. And I thought, this is mine. All of this is mine. The memories, and the grief, and the joy, and the 31 years. Mine. Nobody was going to tell me I was just sitting in it. February 3rd, Aaron called. He didn't start with how I was doing. "Dad, we're running out of time. The bank is moving faster than we expected. We need an answer." "What's the question exactly? Will you sell the house and help us? And if I don't?" He was quiet for a moment. "Then, Melissa has talked to a lawyer about whether there might be grounds to petition for conservatorship, given your age. Given that you're alone. She thinks a case could be made that you're not in a position to make decisions about a significant asset on your own." I sat very still. "Aaron," I said, "you're telling me that if I don't sell my house and give you the money, your wife is going to try to have a court declare me incompetent." "It's not, Dad. That's not how she framed it." "How did she frame it?" He didn't answer. "I want you to think very carefully," I said, "about what you just told me. I want you to sit with that for a minute." I hung up. I sat in Lorraine's chair, the blue one by the window, the one she used to read in, and I stayed there for a long time. Not crying, not angry. Just thinking. I thought about what Lorraine would say. She would say, "Walter, you already know what to do. You're just stalling." She was always right about that. I called a realtor named Jim Decker the next morning. He'd sold 2 houses on our street and had a reputation for being straightforward. I told him I wanted to list quickly, and I wanted a fair price, and I didn't want to drag it out. He walked through the house on a Thursday. By Friday, he had comparable sales ready. He thought we could list at 1.1 and realistically close somewhere between 1 and 1.2, possibly higher given the market. "When do you want to list?" he said. "Yesterday," I said. We listed February 15th. We had 4 offers by February 22nd. One was all cash. A couple relocating from Seattle. Both of them professors, retiring, wanted a house with a garden. When Jim told me about the garden, I told him that was the one. He said I was leaving a little money on the table. I said I was leaving a little money on the table. I said I knew. We closed at 1.18. During those weeks, I did something I'd never done before. I got a passport. I'd never had one. Lorraine and I had always meant to travel internationally and never quite gotten around to it. I applied in mid-February, paid the expedite fee, and had it in my hands by the end of the month. I also opened a new bank account at a different institution. Just mine, just Walter. I looked at Portugal. I'm not sure why Portugal specifically. I think I'd read something about it years ago, about the light in Lisbon, the way the city is built on hills, the way old men sit in cafes in the afternoon, and nobody rushes them. I'm an old man now. I wanted a place where that was acceptable. I booked a one-way ticket to Lisbon. March 16th. I didn't tell Aaron. I didn't tell Carla. Not yet, though I would, and I'll explain why in a moment. I didn't tell anyone except Frank, who stood in my driveway the night before closing and looked at the house for a long time, and then looked at me and said, "Lorraine would think this was great." "You think so?" "I know so," he said. "She always thought you played it too safe." The envelope. I agonized over the envelope more than anything else. More than which flight, more than which neighborhood in Lisbon, more than which pieces of furniture to put in storage and which to give to Carla and which to simply leave behind. Here is what I put in the envelope. A letter. 3 pages, handwritten, on the yellow legal pad paper I've used for notes my entire adult life. In the letter, I told Aaron exactly what I knew. About the conservatorship threat. About the way Melissa had been working on this for months while presenting herself at Sunday dinners as someone who cared about my well-being. About the fact that I was not incompetent and was not rattling around and was not simply hoarding space. About the fact that his mother and I had earned every inch of that house and it was mine to do with as I chose and I had chosen. I also told him other things. Things I should have said a long time ago. That I knew his marriage was in trouble in ways that had nothing to do with money. That I'd watched him become smaller around Melissa for years, quieter, more careful, constantly managing her reactions. That the man who used to build model planes on Saturday mornings had somewhere along the way started making himself disappear to keep the peace. That his mother had noticed it too before she got sick and it had worried her. I told him I wasn't writing this to hurt him. I was writing it because he was my son, and I loved him and I thought someone needed to say it. I also included one other thing in the envelope. The deed to the property in North Carolina. Lorraine and I had bought a small piece of land outside Asheville in 2004. 2.5 acres, a cabin that needed work, a creek running along the back edge. We went twice, and then life got busy, and then she got sick, and I hadn't thought about it in years. I'd paid the property taxes automatically and just forgotten it was there. I signed the deed over to Aaron. Not to Aaron and Melissa. Just to Aaron. I wrote at the bottom of the last page, "This is yours. It needs work." Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe doing something with your own hands is exactly what you need right now. I love you, son. Dad. I sealed the envelope. I wrote Aaron's name on the front. I set it on the kitchen counter where he would find it when he came to see why my phone had gone to voicemail. Lisbon in March is cool and bright. The city smells like salt and tile dust and strong coffee. My apartment is on the 3rd floor of a building in the Alfama district. Old city, cobblestones, laundry hanging between windows, cats sleeping in the sun on narrow steps. My landlord is a man named Eduardo who speaks 4 languages and is teaching me the 5th words of Portuguese every time he sees me. The first week, I mostly walked. I walked until my feet ached, and then I sat in cafes and drank coffee and watched people. Nobody looked at me like I was taking up too much space. Nobody looked at me like I was an asset to be managed. A few people smiled at me. An old woman at a market gave me an extra orange without being asked. I called Carla from a cafe overlooking the river on my 4th day. She answered immediately. "Dad, your number is showing weird. International," I said. "I'm in Portugal." The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then, "You're where?" Carla is 36. She lives in Vermont with her partner Louise and their 2 dogs. She and Aaron have never been particularly close, different temperaments, but she's always been the one who calls on my birthday without being reminded. She sent me soup when I had pneumonia 2 winters ago. She drove 12 hours when the rain died and stayed for 2 weeks without asking once if I needed her to stay. She is, in the way that matters most, a good person. I told her everything. The Christmas Eve dinner, the January pressure campaign, the conservatorship threat, the listing, the sale, the flight. Aaron said what? Her voice had gone very quiet, which with Carla means the opposite of quiet. He said Melissa was talking to a lawyer about having you declared. He did. Dad. I know. Are you okay? I'm sitting by the Tagus River drinking the best coffee I've had in my life and I don't have to answer to anyone, I said. I'm better than okay. She laughed. It was the kind of laugh that has some crying around the edges. Good, she said. Good for you, I mean it. She also said, Aaron doesn't know, does he? No, he's going to lose his mind. Probably. Dad. She paused. What did you leave him? You left him something, didn't you? I know you. An envelope, I said. What's in it? Some things he needed to hear. And the Asheville property. The silence this time was longer. You gave him the Asheville land. Just him, his name only. She was quiet for another moment, and then she said, Mom would have done exactly the same thing. Aaron found the envelope on a Saturday. He called me that evening. It was late afternoon in Lisbon, golden light coming through my window at an angle that made the walls glow. I'd been reading. I saw his name on my phone and I answered. He didn't say hello. You sold the house. I did. You're in Portugal. I am. He didn't say anything for a long time. I could hear him breathing. In the background, I could hear something that sounded like a door closing. Lily's room, maybe, or him stepping outside. I imagined him on the back patio in Scottsdale, the desert dark already, the air still warm. The Asheville property, he finally said. I forgot that even existed. So did I for a while. Dad. His voice broke slightly on that one word. Just slightly. I'm sorry. About what Melissa said. About the lawyer. I should have shut that down the second she suggested it. I knew it was wrong. I didn't. I know, I said. I'm trying to figure out how to fix a lot of things right now. I didn't ask what he meant. I had a feeling I knew. I had put down in that letter what I'd been afraid to say for years, and once things are said in writing, they take on a weight that's hard to walk away from. The letter, he said. Yes. Did you mean it? The things you said about me and Melissa? Every word? He exhaled slowly. It's been hard to read. I imagine. But yeah. He stopped. Started again. Yeah. I've been thinking about it for 2 days. I looked out my window at the city falling into evening. The lights beginning to appear in the windows across the narrow street, someone playing guitar somewhere below. Aaron, I said, you don't have to have everything figured out right now. You just have to start figuring. He was quiet again. Then, is Portugal good? Portugal is very good. Maybe someday Lily and I can come see you. I would like nothing more, I said. It's been 4 months since I landed in Lisbon. Frank has visited, spent 2 weeks, wore the same 3 shirts the whole time, complained cheerfully about the cobblestones, ate his weight in pastéis de nata, and went home looking 10 years younger. He's talking about coming back in the fall. Carla and Louise are coming in June. Louise wants to see the palaces in Sintra. Carla just wants to sit somewhere quiet with her father. I've taken Portuguese lessons every Tuesday and Thursday morning. My teacher is a woman named Anna who has infinite patience and a sense of humor about my accent. I'm slow. I'm getting there. I joined a walking group that meets on Sunday mornings. Retired people mostly from a dozen different countries. There's a German former architect, a British woman who used to be a nurse, a couple from New Zealand who sold everything and left. We don't talk much while we walk. We just walk. It turns out that's enough. I tend the window box now. Herbs mostly. Rosemary, thyme, a basil plant that's doing better than expected. Nothing like Lorraine's rose bushes, and I wouldn't pretend otherwise. But there's something about having a living thing to tend. Something that helps. Aaron and I talk on Sundays. Short calls, mostly. He's working through things. The Phoenix situation is what it is. They'll lose some money, not everything. He got a new position at a regional firm. He sounds different on the phone than he did a year ago. Lighter, somehow. More like himself. He drove up to Asheville in April. Spent a weekend at the cabin alone. He called me from the creek and just held up his phone so I could hear the water. It needs a new roof, he said. I know, I said. I kind of love it. I know that too. I think about Lorraine a lot here. More than I expected to. Or maybe differently than I expected to. In the house, her absence was loud. Every room held a version of her that was no longer there. And the silence was the shape of her. Here, in this city she never saw, she's something else. She's the voice in my head that says yes, keep going when I'm uncertain. She's the reason I know what it feels like to be loved without conditions attached. So I know what it feels like when that's being withheld. She would have loved the light here. She painted watercolors, nothing serious, just for herself, on weekend mornings. This light would have made her pick up a brush. I know it like I know my own name. I bought a small watercolor set last month. I'm terrible at it. I sit on my little balcony on Sunday afternoons, and I paint badly and I think about her, and I don't feel alone. My house sold to 2 professors from Seattle who wanted a garden. I hope they're tending the roses. I hope they figured out that the side gate sticks unless you lift it slightly before turning the handle. I hope on summer evenings they sit on the back porch and listen to the neighborhood settle into night the way Lorraine and I used to, 2 glasses of iced tea on the railing, not saying much, not needing to. I hope they know what they have. I do, finally, clearly, without anyone else's voice in my head telling me otherwise. I know exactly what I have. A river out my window. A language I'm learning slowly. A Sunday walk with people from everywhere. A son who's starting, finally, to find his way back to himself. A daughter who drove 12 hours when it mattered and will sit quietly with me in June and not need to fill the silence. A window box. A terrible watercolor hobby. A one-way ticket that turned out to be exactly the right direction. I'm 63 years old. I'm not rattling around in anything. I'm not an asset to be managed. I'm not hoarding space. I'm living. I've thought a lot about the word alone since all of this happened. My son used it like it was a diagnosis. Like living alone in a house you love, in a life you built, is a condition that needs to be corrected. And I understand now that what he really meant, what Melissa had convinced him to mean, was that my aloneness was an inconvenience to their plans. That's a different thing entirely. Here's what I've come to believe. Not because anyone told me to, but because I lived it. The way you treat people when you think they have nothing left to offer you is the truest thing about you. Aaron wasn't a bad person. He was a scared person who had let someone else's voice become louder than his own conscience. That happens to people. It happens slowly, and I watched it happen. And I said nothing for too long. Because I told myself it wasn't my place. That was my failure. Not just his. Cause and effect doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates. Every time Aaron stayed quiet when he shouldn't have. Every time he let a boundary get moved because it was easier than the argument. All of that was building toward a Christmas Eve dinner where he sat across from his father and delivered an ultimatum with borrowed words. The envelope I left wasn't revenge. It was just the bill coming due on years of unsaid things. I had let them go unsaid too, which made me part of the problem. I needed to own that. What I know about integrity, real integrity, not the version people perform for an audience, is that it costs something. Selling that house cost me, not the money. The memories attached to every wall, every floorboard, the rose bushes. Lorraine planted the spring before she got sick. Walking away from all of that required me to be very clear about what I actually believed versus what I was holding on to out of habit and grief. Those are not the same thing. It took me longer than it should have to tell the difference. And the resilience. That word gets used too easily, I think. People say be resilient, like it's a setting you switch on. What it actually looks like is sitting in your late wife's chair on a February evening after your son tells you his wife is considering having you declared incompetent, and instead of collapsing or retaliating, you get quiet. And you think about what you know to be true. You think about what the person who loved you best would say if she were sitting across from you. And then you move, deliberately, without drama, toward the life you actually want. I painted a terrible watercolor this morning. The river looked like a gray smudge and the buildings looked like suggestions. Anna, my Portuguese teacher, saw it when she arrived and was very kind about it. Eduardo from downstairs knocked on my door in the afternoon to teach me a new word. Frank is coming in October. Aaron called Sunday. He sounded lighter. We talked for 20 minutes about the cabin roof and nothing important and everything important. That's what repair looks like, mostly. Not grand gestures. Just two people deciding to keep showing up. I'm 63. I'm learning a language. I have a window box and a bad hobby and a one-way ticket that already took me exactly where I needed to go. I am not alone. I am just finally, clearly, on my own terms. That's the only kind of living worth doing.